Yeah, welcome. Today is Academy of Tone 255, a very special metal edition again with Emanuel Knorr. Yeah, Emanuel came up with a great idea. Let's do a medley of metal. We went through the whole history from 1969 up until today, and we found an sample or an example of all the important metal songs for almost every year. So we ended up having about like 50 snippets here. And the funny thing is, we talked, and then when we started, we kind of both agreed on the first one, which was Black Sabbath. It's funny for me to see where there was actually kind of a transition from rock to metal, because when did the term metal actually appeared on the scene? When was metal introduced as a word? Do you know?
Well, I'm 28, so I wasn't around when they invented that. And you know, I think one of the most disgusting things nowadays is this whole genre war kind of thing, right? Some people, you know, it's gent, it's core, it's this, it's post, it's that. I don't really like that. I mean, I get that certain stylistic elements, you need a name for that. It's easier to communicate, but you know, I think that it's very hard to name a date. But most people, they agree on Black Sabbath being like the first kind of real like metal song. I don't know if they called themselves a metal band back then, but I think there's this vibe. It's pure evil, right? Right?
Yeah.
What they did there. The bass is distorted, the guitar is distorted, so there's plenty of distortion going on. So it just makes sense to pick that as the first, isn't it? I think when in 100 years or so, when both of us are not around anymore, in the history books they will name Black Sabbath NIB as the first metal track ever.
Okay, yeah, I also do agree on it. The next song is Hard Loving Man by Deep Purple, which is, well, one of those classic rock bands of all time. But even back then, I remember that some of the guys in the press called it, this is a hard rock heavy metal band.
Yeah.
And there we go, you know. I kind of like that riff because it has a galloping thing. And I think that is something, I know it from Bonanza.
Yeah.
But it is something, the galloping effect that is made it very famous in metal. I don't know what era that was. I mean, I know that is probably uncool today, but some galloping
still around.
It's still around. So what do you know about the galloping thing?
Well, so I mean, the reason we've picked that, and I think the idea came from you to pick that song, actually, because I love Deep Purple, but I just know a couple of songs, you know, like Smoke on the Water. Maybe you guys have heard about that. No, but things like Burn and stuff like that. So they have a great history of music that I also really much admire. The thing is that the reason why I think it's very good to have that in there, it's very important to have that in there, even though it's not a full-ass metal band, is that the technique Richie is using back then, that is something which was very important for the history of metal. The palm muted, one note kind of riff kind of thing. Exactly, right? That, I mean, even if you can have a big and broad discussion if that's metal or hard rock, still this is a technique that just made metal, that defined metal over the past couple of decades. Until today, this kind of palm muted sound is what makes metal, really. So that's why it's super important to have that. And you know, in general, like the tone he had back then, it's just nail. It's timeless. It's tight. It's just great. So I think many vintage kind of metal bands, they could take that very tone and make music with it still 40 years later.
Yeah, and I think this
50
rhythm,
years later, sorry.
Of course. That kind of rhythm, that kind of galloping thing is an example how important it is that the time of the guitar and the drums go in sync. Because this is something that I noticed when I was playing it. You know, I went quick and dirty, so I played like 3 tracks, and then I was definitely choosing the one that was in sync with the drum the most. And there was the magic. On other tracks, like the Black Sabbath one, it's even cooler when it's kind of somewhere laid back and
Exactly.
maybe not so much on the beat. It has more meaning when it's heavy and mean. But this one needs to be tuk, 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 and it needs to be in sync. And there's the magic of that one. What I always admire about this galloping thing is, Richie in this version is, I think, the simple version, because the metal guys like you took that to the next level, where, well, it's way faster, and it's also a different accent. Sometimes it's not dum taka dum taka dum. It's what can you tell us about the metal versions, the later ones?
So they, there are guys like for example Jason Richardson and these kind of people. They took it to a whole new level. So I mean, palm muting in general with these kinds of faster paced rhythms, it's the foundation of metal nowadays. It's a technique. Without that, we wouldn't have metal being the way it is right now. It is extremely important to notice that nowadays, I think what people make out of it is not the pure, just having one kind of rhythm and then playing it for an extended period of time like they did it back then, but it's combining these palm mute notes with open notes, especially in gen, like like having these notes, open notes in between. That contrast, that is really important, right? It's historically very important to note here that these kind of riffs were very much important for the development of the whole genre decades after as well.
Okay, here is one Judas Priest. Okay, I fucked up quick and dirty. But what did I like about that example is the, well, tritonus, you call it, or whatever. It's just a half step kind of thing, and that makes it evil, even if it sounds to me like half of an accident. But in a nice way, it's like that's
a very nice accident.
Yeah. It's got some attitude. Well, technically, I don't know if there's anything specific about that, but I kind of like that example because of the tritonus, the flat 5.
I mean, again, the way you just play it was very good, by the way, right? So you had the first, you had the first note muted and the second one, third one open with the slide, right? So you got again this contrast between muted and open notes. You got the tritonus in there. I mean, general, like metal, how it works nowadays, it's very much focused on these kind of scales and intervals that sound slightly harsh, right? So I mean, major sevenths, a major second, these kind of intervals is what usually we the blue note, right? These kind of notes that don't really sound in place if you just put them for a sustained note. These notes, like metal is built around that very much. And what I like very much about the thing is that you can, I think people play it with a kind of power chord, but not having the root note in the bass, right? It's just the fifth, and then it's the root note 1 octave higher. And this makes, this is something which got very popular in the 80s, like Whitesnake and all of that area. But they did it in the 70s, and it sounds just juicy, right? It takes out of the muddiness of the bass, it takes kind of out and just makes these juicy, really great riffs, and it's just great,
Yeah. Super. The next example is another one where Richie Blackmore was involved, Stargazer Rainbow. And we chose that one because it's I think it's a heavy tempo, and it has a unison kind of thing with the guitar line and the bass.
Timeless.
Yeah, it's timeless. And then, of course, Ronnie James Dio on vocals, which will reappear a couple of times in the history of metal as Dio, and he also was a singer with Black Sabbath. So so you can see how intertwined the whole genres were. I mean. Deep Purple, Blackmore, Dio, Rainbow, Black Sabbath is basically, and then in the end, Ozzy had
some kind of romance going on there, certainly.
Yeah, and I think Ozzy had probably the most great guitar players in one band besides Whitesnake. I mean, what you know what I mean? It's like there are some bands that have several guitar players over the years.
I mean, many of these frontmans of these bands, they have a great taste in guitar playing, right? Take Dio. Later when he's doing stuff with like Doug Aldrich as well. He was also in Whitesnake, by the way, Doug. Right?
Yeah.
So one of the greatest rock players of all times, I think. Like the tone he has, it sounds like there would be 10 compressors in his fingers. And then Ozzy, he had Zakk Wylde, he had Jakey Lee, he had Gus G, all these very gifted, talented, humble guitar players. It's just we have Megadeth later on as well. So Dave Mustaine, he's a good guitar player, but you wouldn't describe him as a machine when it comes to certain styles of playing. But the guitar players he had until today, it's crazy, right? So these guys really know, they really knew what kind of what quality is really.
Absolutely. There's one little Doug Aldrich story. Actually, I have two. One of them is you talking about how many compressors in his fingers he has.
Yeah.
Okay, I can actually tell because I have a snippet where he plays My Strat with the Mercury edition. Check that out. Hey, Doug Aldrich has, proven that the compressor is not coming from the amp; it's in his fingers. His tone is in his fingers.
It's crazy.
No matter what he plays.
When I was younger, I've seen him playing on a Marshall MG15 kind of practicing amp, right? Just not a serious machine at all. Yeah. It still sounded the way he sounded. I was like 14, 15. I was looking for any kind of I was trying to spot the Boss compressor on the floor, but there wasn't. Don't know how he's doing that.
Yeah, I mean, it's in the fingers, and it's the guy, and the guy is so sweet. I met him again at Guitar Summit, and we both were guesting that night, and I did my thing. And he was so warm. He was backstage when I came back from my performance, and he was giving me a big hug and said, "Man, blah blah blah." I played with Little Wing, no metal, but he enjoyed that very much. But anyway, we are all living in one universe, and we all share a lot of common ground here, and it goes back to Jimi Hendrix and you name it. They all know.
I'd say there are worse ways to spend a night than seeing Thomas Blue playing Little Wing. One could argue that you might be pretty good at playing this kind of music.
Yeah, that's okay. Then I have some Motorhead. I mean, the thing about Lemmy and Motorhead. Lemmy, by the way, used to be a technician or backliner for Jimi Hendrix too.
Yeah,
you know that,
right?
Yeah, so again, some connection here and there that Lemmy got inspired by Jimmy to stay in that kind of music business, and then when Lemmy did his own thing with Motorhead, he went for the non-compromise bass sound, attitude, tempo. So anything, whatever. It's just about sheer energy first. If there's no energy, it's not Motorhead. There are no prisoners. And I
remember back when I got into metal when I was in my teens. I've seen a video of Motorhead. I don't remember the song it was, but the first comment I saw, and I still remember it today, was this song had so much power. When I started playing it, my phone was out of charge. Now it recharged.
Nice. Yeah. Okay, what else? Godzilla Blue Oyster Cult, I think is something like that. I don't even know exactly, but it is about how heavy you can play the with an extra line, the haunting line on top. But I think this track is, well, first iconic for the visuals, and second for the it needs to be dark and evil and heavy. Simply heavy.
I mean, harmonically and stylistically, it's not exactly what Black Sabbath is, but I think the way they hold the chords with much gain and the sustain coming in, it's it's that kind of riff. It's not the dunk 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 type kind of riff. It's the groovy kind of riff rhythmically, and I mean, what I really much like is the way they use power chords, because again, after permuting, that's a second important technique for metal music. Power chords. I mean, if you have an amp 1, it still sounds good if you play a full 6 notes G major chord on high gain setting. But I think back then some of the amps, they weren't able to really pick up that much information, right? I mean, if you play some vintage Marshall hats, like some JMPs and stuff like that, sound great, but playing big chords wasn't exactly a strength of these amps when they were in a high distortion setting with some pedals and stuff like that. And I think that this kind of riff, like from Godzilla, is a perfect example of how power chords are used in metal. Very important.
Yeah, I mean, another example is Holy Diver.
Yeah.
So it's about the palm mute technique and the heaviness and the chuck. Hey, this is, Ola made this famous, world famous. It's the chuck that is so important. And you know it probably best, but it's like it's so important where I place my palm for the right amount of mute. That makes all the difference. If it sounds like that's not metal. That's what I move it back here instead of So the awareness of the right kind of mute at the right place, that makes it heavy, and that's so important to control that with your playing style.
And the more gain you have, the more important it gets. The more strings you have, the more important it gets. Later on, in my part, I got some stuff with 7 strings and stuff like that. So super important to get that down if you want to have the sound. And again, I mean, Holy Diver, perfect example. This is a great mixture. So you got the palm muted kind of rhythm with a lot of notes being incorporated, and then you also got the sustained note, and you hold that wrong.
Yeah.
Right. So,
wherever. Yeah. The difference between the muted stuff and the hold ones and the accents, that makes a great riff in general, and that's so important in metal, especially as you said, when it's coming to gain, because the more gain you have, the more responsible you are for having it under control, and that's bad when you have too much gain and you have no control over it, unless you make music where it's not important to be controlled or tight. But that's what I admire at metal, is that if it's fast or if it's tight in a way, you have to control it. Otherwise, it sounds shit.
Well, true. I mean, people always tell you that having much gain is like cheating, and there may be some advantages of having much gain, but I think it's as complicated to control that much gain, than having little gain. So it's kind of there's a trade coming with having much gain. I mean, for example, I'm working at a university there as a lecturer, and I have a colleague who's more into jazz. He's not in rock at all. He's like kind of ES 335 kind of guy, And we were having a session like a year ago or something, and then he was playing I had the Iridium with me, and I was on the modern channel, had the boost on, everything, right? So quite a high gain setting. And he was playing it, and he's a very sophisticated jazz player. He's doing bebop and stuff like that. So he's a professional, and he could play things that I couldn't imagine playing. But he wasn't able to get a clean note out of the amp, right? Because it's a different style of playing when there's gain going on, right? It's like having a second instrument, really.
Yeah. Here, my next example for Megadeth, Killing Is My Business. That was quite a challenge for me because it was pretty fast, but it was funky, and I really enjoyed it because of, let's say, the tight and funkiness. I'm not sure if I remember. Something like that. But you have to be, it's almost like Nuno Bettencourt. You have to be.
Yeah, exactly.
You have to be dry and funky and tight, and this was such a cool riff, I have to admit.
Also a lot of blues in there, isn't it?
Yeah, there's some blue notes in there. There's some chromatic stuff in there, and power chords and single lines. It's like maybe it's like Jimi Hendrix on steroids, but funky, in a way. I
mean, Dave Mustaine, especially back in the 80s, hands down, I think he's the best riff writer of the 80s. He brought so much different styles into metal. He has this kind of Nuno, as you said, funkyish, very rhythmical vibe. He also has like the more brutal, almost breakdown kind of riffs. He did have so much stuff with palm muting as well. Great chord work. These guitarists like Marty Friedman and these guys, right, having great leads. So I think Megadeth is one of the most important bands for the history of metal as well. And this riff is just a perfect example of that. And like for younger guys like me, I'm not exactly young, right? I'm almost 30, and I got the beard, and I'm a father and things like that. So I'm not one of the kids, right? But being born in the 90s, let's put it that way. I grew up learning how to play guitar in the 2000s, late 2000s. I started playing guitar when I was like 12, so it was 2008 or something. So we had YouTube, right? We had like Lick Library back then. I ordered DVDs from UK and things like that.
Yeah.
And we had all the stuff, right? Ultimate Guitar, Guitar Pro, and whatever. So I learned playing guitar that way. And how difficult it must have been to be around in the 80s, being Dave Mustaine. And getting this sound, the tone, combining all these notes, and no one telling you how to hold your picking hand and things. It's just crazy. Much respect goes out there.
Yeah. Here's another track that I played. I think that was the one of Anthrax.
Yeah,
something like this. This kind of, D minor and then the minor 6. That's so much 80s.
Yeah.
It's like the hair metal prototype of hundreds of songs. And again, this made it into a lot of different pop songs by,
yeah.
You name it. In Germany, the Ärzte, okay, they are not a metal band. They used to be a punk band or whatever they were called, but actually they are German Schlager with a metal sound.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Metal also becomes mainstream to a certain point, and this is where different kinds of metal maybe disagree, and this is why they kind of stay in their niche, and they try to be purists. You know, it's the same thing with pop music. When you have John Mayer coming, it is people know him as a pop singer that plays guitar, and then some guys would say, yeah, well,
he's a hell of a guitar player. He's great.
Yeah, but you know what I mean? It's like the big audience, they don't even know. They know that he's a great guitar player, but they don't know what kind of music that is. You know, it's just a guy with a guitar that sings, and it's great. And it's the same thing with other styles of music where you think, wow, this is a great song. This is when you make it to the commercial pop level, and I would say metal has achieved that as well as a genre, to be in the pop focus, you know, just like Madonna. I mean, we are talking Metallica, we are talking bands that you know, fill stadiums, that you know, all the big festivals, Wacken and so on. It's becoming so big at a certain time.
Yeah,
I don't know when there was the pinnacle of metal. Is there a period where like every household was listening to metal? Do you have an opinion on that? I don't know.
I mean,
or was this?
It's a very good question. You know, the first thing I want to say about that is I think that like nowadays it's just the way it is, right? If you look at all the big guitar brands and you know, usually the brands make sure that they release instruments that you can play rock or metal music with. It's very rare that a brand focuses just on creating semi-acoustic, whatever guitars. If it's electric, we know that at some point people are going to throw distortion at it, and this is something that comes from rock and metal, and it made it to the mainstream like decades ago. I remember once I played in a cover band for a couple of years, you know, just, you know, get my fridge filled, and I remember playing songs like Chaka Khan and these, you know, and they had distorted muted guitars in the songs or somewhere in the background mixed up with some synthesizer or whatever. Yeah, that one. What was the name?
You know, I mean, pop music with power chords.
Yeah, and the distortion and the muting and all these things that we were talking about a minute ago, right? So it made it to pop music anyway. I think the period of like, I mean, you know, and again, it's hard to really judge from an historical point of view, as I wasn't around back then. I didn't do research on it, but I feel like, you know, the 90s with bands like Nirvana, which are not exactly metal, but it's the kind of same vibe it has. It's aggressive music, it's fast music, it is distortion, it is screaming and things like that. This kind of was the breakthrough to the mainstream. And then I think in the 2000s we have bands like Linkin Park, right?
That's pop.
Exactly. So they have the, you know, the piano tracks and everything super emotional, and then they have rap vocals, and this is all stuff which we more know from mainstream music, and then they mix it up with low-tuned power chord, highly distorted guitars. So I think somewhere in the end of the 90s and beginning of the 2000s, I think that is when really, you know, you were able to hear these stylistic elements of metal guitar now being part of mainstream music, really.
Yeah, in the mainstream, I mean, we have German bands like Rammstein that made it internationally with that kind of sound, and of course their vocals are special too. But and the story, but the guitar sound, you know, wow, massive.
I think the thing about Rammstein is just like they sound how people outside of Germany think Germany sounds. The music is in time. 1, 2, 3. So it's always in time. There's, you know, it's no groove in there. Yeah, you know, no upbeat, nothing. It's always 1, 2, 3, 4, and this is how. And this is just great for the aesthetics of metal, really.
Yeah, and by the way, for the rockers, it's not too far from. I mean, it all is one big thing, but refined in a way.
That's the next video we do, Thomas. We do one on the rock history.
Okay, yeah. So talking about the more modern stuff, I know you will do a huge part in the second section where you actually will also demonstrate a few of the settings and things. When you look at the second part, which is again way more songs that you were recording, are there any particular examples that kind of stick out in a way that says, wow, this is super special? Maybe you don't have to go into all the details, but it's just like what changed from the early phase of metal into the later phase of metal, from like the 90s to the 2000s and beyond.
Yeah, first is the tuning.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And then-
So yeah, so I had so many tunings. There's no way I can remember that for my second part. Right? So I got to read it off or just ignore it. Yeah, but basically what I did is I had a couple of guitars in different tunings, and then I even had to pitch them down with the software to get the the guitar lower. So there, we have anything from drop A to 7-string standard tuning to 8-string, even 8-string drop tunings, which I then did with a pitch shifter, because my 8-string is not here right now. So it went lower and lower and lower, and I wouldn't say that the lower it is, the better or the more brutal it sounds. That's certainly not true. There are bands that play standard tuning, they sound really heavy. Like bands like Silosis and metal people will know, right? They sound super heavy and they're just in standard tuning. But there's a couple of like a low tuned sound. It feels more polished in a way. It feels less harsh. And I think that is something that makes it easier to make it sound very tight. At least the tightness that we are going for. This is kind of the low end bass tightness in metal. Yeah, so that's the one thing. Then the second thing, which may sound like ironic in a way, because I think that something that aesthetically changed in all sorts of music is that we don't focus on mids anymore. So we boost the bass, we boost the highs, and then we leave out the mids. And that was different in the 70s, 80s, 90s, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, that's the modern essay. I comment on that. Now we get the take from the other generation take on that. Let's go.
Yeah. I mean, I totally get the point of the whole world changed to more bass and more highs. Rap music, metal music, anything modern wants to sound huge, big, like a universe. And I know that the 70s, I mean, we go the Eagles, and they had all mids. It was acoustic guitars on a dark desert highway, and then the 3-part harmonies and everything in the mid, sweet mids, and the woody sound and acoustic guitars and you name it, and the piano, all wood, everything in the middle. So we went from one extreme to the total other extreme. True. And here comes the biggest conflict that I have. If you have a young engineer that is raised on metal, but even worse on hip hop, that has to mix a rock band, then there's a clash of universes. Where are the mids that are needed in rock music? And I think there is even an important information in the mid frequencies, in the mid range, in metal music as well. Even though you are focusing on expanding the sound to get it bigger, the whole point is any good sound needs to have a good balance. And when you create a bigger, wider picture with more low ends, you have more responsibility. But if you are losing some information in the mid range, you are gone. Because the root note, without any overdrive, without any overtones, sounds just like a boring contrabass. Without any...
I get what you mean. I think I went. I also have a certain taste in how I like my mixes to sound. I like my mixes generally in metal, generally speaking, with a slight mid scoop, but I don't really enjoy the sounds where there's all of the mid information taken out. There are a couple of examples which I will show which we had in the beginning. For example, Dimebag's guitar sound. It's a transistor amp. It's not a tube amp. And
Randall.
Yeah, Randall it was, right? And there's no mids at all. So the amp, it can do it. You will hear it. It's one of the sounds where I think I got closest to the original, actually. I didn't expect that. I was like, there's no way I can get this sound. Started playing, oh, well, that's great. Anyway, I mean, that's not my type of sound. This is too extreme for me. And then there are bands like, for example, Periphery, produced by Nolly Getgood. Maybe you've heard that name before, right? I think hands down he's like one, if not the greatest producer of metal. And now there's no mix that sounds bad. Like he's amazing, and I would cut off my leg to be able to mix the way he does, like hands down.
Don't do that. Don't do that.
I don't. As long as I have my hands, I'm good. Well. Anyway, so for example, he also does do the mid scoop, but he does it very controlled, I think. And still you can hear that, though the guitar stereo pan, when he's kind of in his mixes, still the guitar comes from the mids as well. And I think that is because he has a very good understanding of good mids, because there are good mids and bad mids, right? And
exactly.
And so that's a general trend I've seen: less mids, more highs, more bass. And then the last thing which I want to mention is, I think from the 2010s, somewhere around that on, and this is now very controversial, many guitar sounds, they have less bass. Because people started to understand that guitar is not a bass-focused instrument. The bass comes from the bass drum,
and the kick.
From the kick drum, and from the bass. Right, and when I was young, we were joking about bass players. They're not important. Metallica has Justice for All. There's no bass. It sounds great. And things that 15 years old talk, but it's super crucial for a sound, a good sound this nowadays. We have the one song. It's called "The End of All We Know" from Bleed From Within, which I played. It's a great song, and the sample we have there, it's just the drums. There's no bass in there, so you hear the guitar quite well. I think it sounds quite good, but you'll feel that there's something missing, and you can't recover it in the guitar. If I would now start boosting 150 hertz in the guitar, it doesn't sound good at all. And I think guitar sounds, they had more bass in the 80s and in the 90s. They were more bass heavy back then. And with modern metal, it's like, they separate that. Guitar is not a bass instrument. It does have some bass. It's not that they cut it, but they don't boost it at least. They leave it as it is, or just slightly control it with a multi-band compressor, for the palm use and stuff like that. But there's no way that you push up the bass on a guitar track. This is also something that has changed, I think.
I mean, talking about, making the right frequency speak, I think it's a general thing, no matter what kind of music, if it's rock, metal, blues, whatever. The thing is, I also have a very distinctive frequency picture. I call it picture because it's like, for me, I can see the graph of frequencies, and there are certain frequencies that I personally don't like. If you give me too much 3K, it makes my ear
Thomas,
bleed.
that's racist.
Yeah, I hate the 3Ks.
We will build a wall. We will make 3K pay for it.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, yeah. And the other thing is, I have no problem with 4.7K because that's something that my Marshall amps and cabinets delivered all my life. So I grew up with friendly frequencies, or at least frequencies that I knew that I liked, and others that I don't like that much. But what I learned is, when I kind of go too far with what I don't like, I make a hollow mix. So it is all about the balance and, being nice to everybody, but give everybody the right spot. And the lower the instrument, the more the overtone is important, and because that gives the kind of presence. And I know that, what is it? A low E string is 63 hertz or something. I don't know exactly. But 63 hertz by itself is pretty low.
Yeah.
And when we carve out the mud and have a clear overtone, then there's the magic. And that's the whole thing about the EQ, also on an amplifier, that I can get the good frequency, so to speak, and the right overtones, because that gives the sound a certain grip and presence. Grip for you as the player, and presence to have a place in the mix that actually work, versus other instruments that are also on stage, like the bass drum and whatnot, you know?
Yeah.
And that's a long journey when you go through that thing, and you can be happy if you found your place. And that's one thing, just a little comment here. Some people believe they have to play with 20 sounds or 10 sounds, and they don't even master one. So for me, it's important they have one sound that actually works. And then you can go to the next sound, and then you have to spend some time and learn how to master the second sound, because what's the use of having 10 sounds that don't work? Nobody will hear it, nobody will enjoy it. But if you have one great sound, doesn't matter what style of rock, just name AC/DC for the rock guys, or any good metal track also needs to have a guitar that is here, that talks to you all the time, the whole song through, because there's the message. And when you have guys that go through 10 presets in one song, and some people master it, I'm all for that, it's fine. But most people think they need 10 sounds, and they only master maybe one or none.
So true, yeah.
Just a reminder.
There was so much truth in what you said, so I really agree on the majority of what you said there, especially like, if there's a frequency that you dislike, it's not a solution to just kill the frequency and take it out, because it will create a hollow sound. That's 100% true. So what you got to do is really, the frequency is there, right? And it just belongs there. What you got to do is to kind of control the frequency, to give it the right balance, to maybe pan it somewhere, right? So things like that is what you really need to do to that. That's super true. Also like mastering, many sounds. I mean, we're a bad example now, because this was such an intense week. It was like, the way I did it was recording the DI first, and I got this little boy here, which is a reamping box. It went to the amp 1, and then I would reamp it through many different IRs depending on the exactly. So I still have headache. It was so much fun, but it was very intense. Very like focusing. It almost feels like making rocket science here in the studio.
One little comment on my side. I was fairly straightforward. I used the Les Paul. I used that Les Paul copy because it's a semitone lower. And I used the Strat. I used the Mercury, and I used only Blue Box with 2 cabinets. The Stack 67 and the Metal. 3 cabinets. Metal C80 and the V30 preset on the Blue Box. So I took it. Of course, the world wasn't that elaborated back in the vintage days of metal, which made my job easier.
That's good for you. So you had 15 tracks with 3 cabs and 2 guitars. I had 35 tracks. I used one guitar with Fishmans. I used one with EMGs. I used one with Clubman pickups, right, to get the more vintage sounds for some of the tracks. I used Seymour Duncan's, DiMaggio's. I used 6 strings. I used tuned down 6 strings. I used the 7 string, and I used like 20 different IRs. So
okay,
yeah,
but again, it is I think so important that we had spent the time and effort to try to recreate the sounds, because I think we both learned a lot about the details and also about the amp. I mean, you just told me that you discovered settings on the amp 1 that you didn't think that it was possible.
Yeah, so the way I used the amp 1 is, when I received it, I plugged it in, I played, and was like, "Wow, this sounds good. I'm happy with it." And I'm happy to admit that I'm mostly using the modern channel for what I do. It's just the sound that works for my productions, that I personally like. And that's it. And then I use the Mercury, which is
Yeah, I can see the light. Yeah.
It's somewhere down there. I use that a lot at home when I'm doing practicing and doing like some recordings for like not metal projects, and when I'm playing live and doing metal projects, I use that one. And I set it up in a way that I really like it. Again, I'm very open with that. I really much like the 5150 kind of vibe from which you can get from the modern way. Like out of the box, it's kind of very much voiced in that direction. So I'm super happy having everything that I want in that tiny box. What I didn't do with the amp until now is, can I recreate X, Y, Z? And I know that you do that every week in your live stream, right? That's what it's all about. And then what I actually did at the beginning of this week, I was trying to recreate a couple of sounds from amps that I have. So, for example, the Marshall you see here is a Valve State 8100. That's a transistor amp, and it's used for Death, the band Death, which we also have in the medley. So Chuck Schuldiner was using that amp, and the reason why I have that amp is because it's such an iconic amp for metal rhythm guitar tones. And I have another comment on that, which I'll drop later. But what I did is I was plugging in that amp and was trying to make this amp sound like that amp with the same IR and same guitar and everything. And I was like, holy crap, this works. It just sounds like almost the same. It felt like I was using a digital product that was just making a profile and but I had to do it with my hands, but still was great. Then I used another amp. I don't remember the other one. It's just a couple of amps here. I have most of them stored somewhere else. I think it was a dual rectifier. And I wasn't happy with it because I was always in modern mode. I like it so much that I forgot it has two more. So I was almost giving up. I was like, how does Thomas get the tones out of this amp? It sounds good, but it's not the same. And I've seen videos of you actually doing the dual rectifier thing with the M1. And it was random.
And I used classic.
I went to classic. I never ever. And I was there immediately. I took out a little bit of the bass, went the bass down and stuff like that, and I was like, wow, it sounds like the dual rectifier. And it was very good for me because the way I used the amp before was like based on my liking in the situation where I am right now. And I've, sometimes when I've been at sessions where they don't play metal, I had this amp with me. I just used the other modes, but just 2-minute setup and that's it. Go for it. A sound that I like. Now I started to understand what you can do with this amp, and something that is so amazing is this is so responsive. If you start, it's almost dangerous. If you start taking the mid knob, especially the mid knob, if you move it 1/2 of a centimeter, it sounds completely different as if you would have another amplifier. So was just like a warm-up exercise to recreate amplifier sounds from other amps I had here. And then the second challenge, and this is something which I want to say because people also have to understand that. The amp tone is extremely important for everything to come, but the amp goes into a cabinet. The cabinet is mic'd with a microphone. The microphone and the cabinet are in a room that is built from certain materials. It goes into a mixing desk where there's a preamp. That goes into a DAW where there's people like me who start playing around with equalizers, compressors, with certain plugins and outboard equipment that change the sound. And then they mix it, and then they start playing it, and there's other instruments. So the other instruments, there's something like frequency masking, which covers some of the guitar, and the guitar covers some of their frequencies. And then they put it into a master chain, and then the master chain, they again start putting on preamps, tubes, tapes. They start EQing, so there's a whole lot going on. Now, I don't want to minor the importance of a good guitar tone, but the tones we got, like being a professional audio engineer as well, producing bands, stuff like that, I can tell you they're super close to the original thing, but you can't expect them to sound 100% like that because there's 10 or 20 more steps that they do after the guitar is recorded. I'm amazed by the fact that we got so close with the tones that we have. I didn't expect that, to be honest. I love this amp. I've playing it for years now. I didn't expect to come so close to the originals. And And yeah, I mean, the speaker is super important. We don't have the exact IRs as the people at the cabinets who recorded that. You know, we may have something similar, but it's not the exact same thing. I'm super happy with how everything turned out.
Yeah, and that's a good point, because I think first of all, the speaker is 50% of the sound, because it is kind of, at least because it's the last section that gives the character, and we are so sensitive to the frequency response of the cabinet, which is IRs basically. So this is makes us feel, we recognize it. It's like, this is where we click, and so it needs to have a very good speaker or speaker simulation. And then there's one thing, like the mental aspect that you mentioned, is like, okay, you clicking with a modern channel, and this is your baby, and then you connect with this, and you play Amp1 Mercury Iridium edition all the time on the modern channel, and it's like you are home. Yeah. I believe that's great. On the other side, I think it's a good thing for us to challenge ourselves into a new territory. Certainly. And again, it is a proof that other people also would click on other sounds. Certainly. So when I talk to friends or customers or whoever using my amps, it's like some people rave on totally different things, and it's like, well, I have my personal taste, and I know this one is great and this is one, but it's like, it's so it makes such a difference because it's personal. When certain people with their playing technique, with their mindset, with what they are doing in their guitar, prefer whatever, this setting on this channel, it makes total sense. And it's like me doing my thing, different thing, I need a different setting. And then there's always the comments of the guys that say, why don't you make Amp1 a one-channel amp? I need the vintage channel only. And I said, yes, I know what you mean, but hey, if I would cut out all the other 3 channels, 80% of the amp is the power amp and the power supply. Yeah. And the rest is, I could drill a hole in the amp and get the clean channel dead. It is simply that much in components. Yeah. And this is what people don't understand. And therefore, I believe I wanted to give the variety of tones, the options. If you don't use them, I'm happy for you. That's something mental, very important. Anything you don't need makes your life easier and you're playing better. Yeah. Well, the older I get, and I'm older than you guys, trust me, less is more. Play as much notes you want to like, be Yngwie, and play as fast. But if you don't have to deal with 20 sounds, you are on the way to become an actually better guitar player. That's my opinion. Unless you make soundscapes and have this as an art, which is also fair enough. I've tried to be a bit provocative in a way to make a point here, because today all the guys watching YouTube, they believe they need to have those 25 presets and everything. Sometimes you don't. And that's the point, my point. Yeah,
again, I'd certainly, I'm on the same side with many of the things that you said. And it also has to do a little bit with my relation to the Amp1 and the reason why I'm sitting here today and playing this amp. And we've talked about that a lot before, but this amp got me back into analog gear and stuff like that, messing around with it. And it's not that I feel the urge to be now a vintage guy or to be a blues guy, because I'm not. I'd be lost if you put me in a blues session, give me a guitar with a string action that high and stuff like that. I cry.
That's the blues.
Exactly. If I sing about crying now. Okay. What I'm trying to say is, I don't need to be that guy. But everything I hear, everything I do, everything I understand about anything different than what I already know, helps me to enrich what I am, what I actually do. And this was every tone I need to rebuild. There's a learning curve. There's a learning process. even if it's a non-metal tone, I'd start learning about a certain frequency that has a certain effect and stuff like that, and this makes me be better at my thing in the end. So, yeah, like, I gotta be that honest. This was a super intense phase. The last 10 days, it was extreme, and I don't remember having worked that much in the last couple of years, to be honest, right? Day and night, sitting here with my headphones, tweaking knobs, EQing and stuff like that. But it was so much worth it. I enjoyed. I learned a lot, and just like a little bit of marketing right here. How much is that amp? $850
Yeah,
something like that. And I used an IR software, which you can get. It's a simple one for like $50 or $60. I didn't use a 2 nodes or whatever. It's just simple software. You don't even need the attenuator with this amp. You can just go in and that. So I had like 800, 900 euros of value here, and I created 4 decades of heavy metal sounds that even if they're not 100% there, they're like 80% there. And this is crazy. This is just amazing.
Yeah, I'm also astonished how close you can get with these 2 amps already, and everybody knows I'm working on MX, but the thing is, already with these, and these sounds will ship with the MX, is a lot of stars in this universe. I mean, there are some stars that are not in there, but is this so important? Maybe not. And I think maybe now is the time where you can show us some of your later samples in a little bit more detail, how you recreated some of the sounds. Hey, Emanuel, thank you so much for taking the time. I know that you have a family, and I know that you have other things in life.
They're on vacation. That was the whole point of that. I was like, let's make the big project when they're not here. So next video will be shorter next month.
Yeah. So hey, thanks so much for taking that effort. And I know how it is. Once you dig in, you get torn into the rabbit hole,
and you can't stop. And you
can't stop.
You go on tweaking, and the next day you start doing it again, and
And but then and this is the thing, you do this once, and you have been there, you've done it, and and that's the good thing about experience. Jimi Hendrix, have you ever been experienced? Yes, I have. And this is what you've done. You went there the whole 9 yards, and this is. Hey, so I think it's now time for the second part of Emanuel Knorr's deep dive into the metal tones.
Yeah, all right, Thomas. We say goodnight for now.
Yeah.
We now ban all vintage Strats and Les Paul from this place. We're entering a new world. Let's go.
Let's go. And I say bye-bye with my blue Strat, which I actually was playing on my tracks. Cheers.
everyone, how is it going? It's Emanuel here from my home studio. I'm playing the Amp 1 Iridium tonight for you, and I'm super stoked to be here. The first episode was way fun, and I guess this one is just as fun, if not even more fun. I mean, you've seen what we did over the past couple of weeks. We just had such a great time, such an intense time, difficult time, but such a great time putting together all these tones for you. So we did it. The thing that I really wanted to do for ages, but I never found the time for it, really. Just putting together a medley with some of the greatest songs and especially tones of the metal genre over the past, what is it, more than 50 years. It's 5.5 decades of metal tone, guys. So today we started with Black Sabbath and NIB from 69, and we went up to 99 with Children of Bodom, Bed of Razors, and we covered 3 decades of metal tone. And just a little cliffhanger, we'll be releasing a second episode where we'll also cover modern metal tones starting from the year 2000 until recently. So I'm super happy to do this. I'm super excited to be here. Guys, please drop a horn. Please let me know that you're there. Okay, drop me a horn emoji or a guitar emoji. Please drop something to the chat because I'm having an eye on it. And that also means that I see your questions. So I'm live on TV for you. If you want to talk about a certain topic, if you want me to explain something, talk about something, or just make sure to leave a comment, and I make sure that I cover that. All right, here we are. Let me quickly show you the settings on my Amp 1 Iridium that I started with. So this is the Amp 1 Iridium in the classic setting. And these settings are kind of close to what I did with the Dream Theater, tones that we had. Basically, I did some research on all of the tones, right? So please don't hate if if I got one or two things wrong, but I made a list here because there were so many tones. The reason why I start with that is that John Petrucci is pretty much my favorite guitar player. I mean, he's sharing the top of the list together with Guthrie Govan. But in terms of songwriting and style and all of that, he had such a big impact on me. And I guess it's common ground with most of the metalheads. If it is old school metalheads, if it is new school metalheads, that Dream Theater is certainly a very important band. So I tried to recreate his tone from the Images and Words era. And what I did to do that is I used the classic channel. I did use the gain on 10 because, Petrucci, he likes using gain. And I put the bass on 6. It is on 6 right now, so that's cool. The mid's on 3, so also that works. And the highs on 4. I had them on 3 because I also play a little bit lead guitar, and I don't like my lead guitars to be too sharp. So that is the exact setting I did use on the video, and obviously I did not have any reverb in there because it was just riff and not lead guitar. So let me play riff again. This is Pull Me Under by Dream Theater. I think this is something all of you know, right? This is such a great tone, and it's super close to the original, I think. I did a little bit of EQ tweaking, to be fair, in the video, but that's really all I did, right? So it was guitar, Amp 1, straight into a DAW. I didn't do any, any crazy stuff with it. I didn't just only use a very simple EQ and just basically do standard stuff because I'm using an IR, so it's half analog, half digital signal chain, right? And then digital sound does things on two guitar that guitars actually don't do. So if you mic up a cabinet, it's very unlikely that you'll have some material above 5 or 6K. So I usually take these frequencies out a little bit, do a high cut, do a little of low cut, and that's it really. So it's on the classic mode, which is something I newly discovered because as soon as I got the amp, I just dived into a setting which I like, which works for me, and I'm obviously, I mean, I love all the 70s, 80s, 90s stuff, but I'm more torn towards modern metal right now. That's what I play, that's what I do. So I went straight to the modern mode, which gives me the 5150 tone that I need, that I love, and that I use every day. So this was actually a great opportunity to also discover a little bit about the other modes. And the classic mode is just giving you a very good Mesa kind of sound. So if I'm correct, what he used on the album was a Mark II C Plus legendary Mesa Boogie amp, right? And he also has a signature version on it, which is way more expensive than the Amp 1 though. And he also used the 4x12 cabinets with V30 speakers. So this is pretty much a great, modern metal chain. Still, these Mesa kind of cabinets and ours are pretty common to use nowadays on mono metal, and it just works. I mean, it is the classic mode, so it sounds like not being too modern, and they used similar kind of stuff back in the 80s and 90s, but also kind of modern riffing works quite good on this amp. Just a little thing. So my heater doesn't work. My hands are quite cold. So I was trying to get warmed up for this episode, but it doesn't really work. So let me play a couple of faster notes to get my hands running. So, the great thing about this kind of setting is that it really works for both worlds. I mean, it's obviously more focused on being a rhythm sound, right? Which certainly, delivers on that. Right, so no doubt that can have a good time playing some great riffs with that, but also works for lead guitar as well. This setting. Let me put in some reverb here to make it more juicy and wet for you guys. Let's see, how does this? Yeah, there's some. This sounds quite good, doesn't it? So, I mean, if it was a sole lead sound, what I would do certainly is add some mids. I mean, sorry, that was treble. I would not add treble, certainly. Add some mids. So let's see how it sounds with slightly adjusted setting. That's even too much. I mean, that's a thing I keep telling Thomas about this amp. This amp is so powerful. It is so dynamic. It is so flexible. I would say in German. If you turn it up just a little bit, it's ending up in a completely different sound. So let's try to dial in the lead tone based on that Dream Theater rhythm setting. Sounds good, right? So kind of something like that I would do to the sound if I was playing it on a lead guitar kind of situation. All right, let's go for the next sound, which I also covered in my medley. Which one to pick? I mean, let's do a little bit of Slayer. So, if my research is correct, Slayer did use a JCM 800. I think that's about right because it kind of sounds like a JCM 800. It's a really dry sound. And this is something the JCM 800 can certainly do. So I'd pull down the gain a little bit may not make sense to some of you because it's Slayer. Why would you put down the gain? Because it's a band with 2 guitar players, which play a little different. So it adds up in the mix to be more gainy. So gain down to 8, right? So second setting is bass down to 4. Interesting one. Then we got the mids on 3. That makes sense as well because Slayer doesn't have it's not like with modern bands where they kill the mids. Well, but not too mid focused the sound, let's put it like that. And now the funny part, which I think makes this sound the way it does, treble on 7. This is something I wouldn't exactly do out of my head, but it did work quite good for the Slayer sound. So I just said a second ago that I don't really like harshness in my sounds, but it just works for certain genres, and Slayer is certainly one of it. The main difference is that we're using a different cab, which is the IR I used is something like a Marshall A type 4x12 cabinet, and what they used on the album was a cab with G12T75 speakers, and this impulse response is based on something like that as well. So this is how we sound now. Does give you some serious Slayer vibes, doesn't it? So I mean, it's such a great thing. It's still the same channel. We were close to a very thick sounding heavy Mesobuki tone just a minute ago, and just by tweaking some knobs, we are very close to that very harsh Slayer rhythm guitar sound. So it sounds just very close to the album, I think, personally. Again, if you see the video again in the beginning, right, you'll hear that there are slightly less highs on there because that's the thing that I did with the equalizer, and that's the difference between having a digital and having a fully analog. But sorry guys, I wasn't down for miking 12 caps out now for the video. And it has all the quality that you'd like to have from a Slayer guitar sound. Right, so it's kind of very close to the original thing, I'd say. I'm not gonna try playing leads on that. The reason why that is right. So I mean, you must have a lot of imagination to make this sound like imagine like a proper lead sound. So this is meant to be a rhythm guitar sound, and that's why I'm not going to do. Yeah, oh, sorry, that was the wrong button. That's why we're not going to try diving into a lead sound with this. And I mean, for the video, I did use a guitar with EMG81 pickups because that is also what Jeff used back in the day. I remember. So this is my Ibanez AZ guitar. I tend to pick this for live streams because I know that many of you guys, like unlike Thomas and me, you don't have a wall hanged up with 20 guitars or something. This is kind of an Ibanez AZ. It's just the way it comes from the factory. It has Simon pickups on it. So even if you not have the exact guitar they did use on the album, I want to show that the Amp one can still do these tones very good. All right, guys, the chat is kind of calm, so let me know if you are here. I want to see your comments. I want to hear your questions. Let's have it. Let's have a little chat here. Whilst you are writing me some comments, I'm gonna prepare the next sound. So how about some good old Pantera? Oh yeah, baby, that's a great idea, I think. So let us take a look at the amp settings again. Let me take a quick look at my notes because I also got this one here. So we put the gain on 10 again. Dimebag kind of known for having a lot of gain on his sound. And what we do then to the bass is we'll push it to 8, right? Because it's kind of a very, very bass heavy sound, but I'll further elaborate on that in a second. Bass to 8, now comes the real drastic change, which is putting the mids to 0. You've heard me right, 0. I mean, quite common with especially modern metal sounds, starting from the 90s to really push down the mids. But this is extreme, right? And I mean, Dimebag didn't use an amp 1 back in the day. Rest in peace, Dime. He did use a Randall amp, but it was, if I remember correctly, it wasn't a tube amp. It was a valve amp. So we'll hear how it sounds in a second. I think I got it really close. And then last but not least, the highs go down to 6. Not a major decrease to what we had before. So again, highs on 6, that's something I usually don't do on guitar amplifiers. So still a not super common thing. The reason why we have so much bass and so much highs is that we don't have any mids, and we need something to compensate for that, right? Now the cabinet, which he was using on the album, due to my research, was a Celestion G12K85 loaded 4x12 cabinet. I didn't get the manufacturer, though I think it is Randall as well. And I didn't have that exact model in my library. So the IR I used was a Mesa Boogie based IR, but still with the same speakers. And this is how it sounds. So I think I got it really, really close. Right, so this is pure dime gold, I think, and it's very rare that I see amplifiers, that kind of are capable of getting this tone. It's quite hard to get with a tube amplifier because it just doesn't sound like a tube amplifier. But yeah, the amount of mids is just so low that it's super hard to get that from most amplifiers out there, because even if you put down the mids right to 0, still, there's a healthy amount of mids being in there. But as I said a minute ago, the amp 1 is super powerful tool, so the EQ knobs really do their job well on this amplifier, So means that you can have much control over the mid-range, which is kind of where tone happens, I think. And putting down the mids to 0 on this amp means that there's actually 0 mids in the tone, right? And it just makes sense that it would work. Let me play a little lead guitar. I think he'll also do something else to his lead tones in terms of EQing on the guitar amp, but maybe we'll come close to that. I can play you a couple of Dimebag Darrell licks like. Right, so I think it is quite much there. Again, this is not set up for a lead guitar tone. This is the rhythm tone, but with some slight adjustments, I think we'll get there. Before I get to the next tone, I see that there are a couple of questions. Guys, don't be shy. I am here for you. I'm here to serve you, the warriors of tone, right? So I'm happy to answer anything that you want to know. So let me take a look. Frank wrote, I completely agree with your belief in the less is more principle, dear Thomas. Since making the transition from the Helix floor to the Amp 1, I've learned how important it is to work with a good, there's something missing, amplifier. Good basic sound, second comment. Good basic sound and a few extra spices with the Helix Stomp XL. My most important effect has become the guitar's volume control. Phenomenal. Thank you, Thomas, for these possibilities. So I think, Frank, this is a very valuable comment, and you're referring to what Thomas said in the interview that we just saw a couple of minutes ago, where Thomas said, before trying to nail 20 sounds, which is what we did here in this video, you should get your basics down first, and you'll understand quickly, I think. And this is now a very critical thesis of mine, but I think that most guitar tones you'll get there with just having all the knobs on 5, just being in a very neutral setting, and then just moving from there, and then the rest is done by. As I also mentioned in the interview, you still have a guitar, which is made from a certain wood, having certain pickups. Then you go into a cable, having, pedals, and then you'll have a cabinet, which is mic'd in a certain position. There may be tons of different mics to use, and it makes a huge difference if you just move the mic 2 centimeters, right? So I think that generally speaking, having a great basic setting that you feel comfortable with is a great starting point to experiment. And if you want to go further, then again, this amp, the knobs are so powerful. Just move something by just a millimeter, and you'll hear that there's going to be a different tone. All right, second thing, second question I see. What you guys think about Ugly Kid Joe's sound? I think it's a very versatile and heavy band. To be honest, I'm not too much into that. So I'm not confident on commenting on that. I do have a couple of tones in my head right now here playing, but I'm not an expert on that. So please forgive me if I leave out to answer this one. Dragon Ball Z. Lucas asked if I've ever played something from Dragon Ball Z on the guitar. Not until today, but maybe this can be the topic for another episode. All right, enough of talking. Well, just continue to talk, but about something else, which is the next amp setting. So we did have Pantera, we did have Slayer, we did have Dream Theater. Let's go for Metallica, right? A little metal band. Maybe some of you may not have heard of them before. Metallica is a band that, it's such an iconic band. We can have now years of discussions about their role for metal and if they are super heavy or not and whatnot. But I just tend to leave this kind of stuff out. I like Metallica. I like underground bands that are very unknown. I like mainstream bands with metal. I like modern bands, I like the old school bands. I like them all. I think I can always discover something which I like about their sound, about their playing, about their composing and stuff like that. So I think undoubtedly Metallica is one of the biggest metal bands and we'll never ever have a metal band like this again. The times where you have a band that everyone knows like that, where they sell T-shirts and Primark of that band, I guess it's over, right? So let's enjoy Metallica as long as they're still here. So again, we're in classic mode, still there. And then we'll do some slight adjustments. So again, we are on 10 on the gain, right? That's cool. Bass we'll drop down to 5, and that is because we have mids again, so we don't need the bass to make up for that. Mids on 3, and then we'll go with treble on 5, a slight decrease on that. So let's play some Metallica riff. Is it the right cap? Sorry, it is. This one is louder, so sorry, let me decrease the volume a little bit. Don't want to hurt your ears, guys. That sounds better. Didn't go that far. I remember playing that song from my teens, but it's been ages that I played the full song. But wow, I think this tone again is quite close. Super heavy. It does have right now. Well, when I'm hearing it, I think we can drop the highs a little bit. This sounds quite accurate, doesn't it? Let's go for a couple of more Metallica riffs. What else do I know? It has been so long. What is this? This is such a great tone. I could play ages on that. I mean, Metallica, I just remember all these riffs. It's 100% not prepared, so I'm sitting in an unheated apartment right now. My hands are freezing. I need to do these downstrokes, and it's been 10 years that I've played these riffs. But it's so much fun. And this song had a breakdown, didn't it? It was so much ahead of the time. They did have breakdowns back then, right? Breakdowns, similar stuff. It's not exactly a breakdown, but just great to play these things again. Do I have another one of Metallica in stock before we go to the next setting? We did. What was the Master of It's all coming back. The muscle memory is hitting in. It is so much fun to play that. So I would love to now relearn all the Metallica riffs, but we have to cover a couple more tones. But before we do that, before we go to the next tone, let's take a look at the chat again. Sonja is here. Great. Thanks for being here, Sonja. So was Metallica a Scoop Mark 2C plus 2C? Yeah, I think that is true. So I didn't tell you what I found out during my research, which was that Metallica did play a Mark 2C plus for this song using a Mesa Boogie Cat with 4x12 V30 speakers, which just makes sense. Which just makes sense because it sounds so much like it. And again, we're on the classic channel, right? So yeah, I think that again, I did that for Dream Theater, and again, John Petrucci was playing Mesa as well. So I think it just makes sense. I made a little mistake. Let's fix that very quick, okay? So forget some of what I said about Pantera because I wasn't in the modern setting. I had much bass, I had no mids, and I had much highs in there and super much gain. So the most important factor is that I was using the modern channel for the intro song, which we did. It just makes sense. It did sound quite like it, but I think on the modern. This is full Pantera. Sorry for forgetting to adjust the setting, right? But this is the Pantera sound. This does sound quite like the original. I'm kind of fascinated how much it sounds like Pantera. And this is also the reason why I had such a boost in volume when I switched back to the other settings. This doesn't have any mids. This is the beauty and the ugly at the same time of this tone. I mean, I love Dimebag mostly for how he played. I didn't exactly fall in love with the tone, but it just suits the band so well. And Dimebag is someone who, by the way, playing wise, does have quite some blues phrasing in his playing. So if a real proper blues guy would hear this tone, oh damn, that would be funny. All right, sorry for forgetting to mention that. So if you're trying to do the Dimebag thing, go to the modern channel, kill the mids, push the rest, and you'll be fine. Cool, all right, let's go for the next setting. But before that, there are more comments here. So there, you guys start interacting with each other, which is great. Keep on doing that. Svenny wrote something, which is also not exactly a question. All right, so guys, you feel free to ask me anything you like. I'm here to answer your questions. This is my job, right? Let's talk with each other. That's what we're here for. All right, let's go for Death, because we just went back to Dimebag and Pantera, so it just makes sense to go on with Death. Not because they play the same kind of music, but they have one similarity in terms of tone, which is that Death, Chuck Schuldiner, also rest in peace, Chuck, also played a valve amp, not a tube amp, which most of us do. So let's take a look at the settings again, and let me tell you what I found out, and based on that, what I did in the video at the beginning. So Chuck Schuldiner on the song Symbolic did use a valve state 8100. Let me switch back to that camera, because you can see that I only, let's take this thumb, this is better. Sorry, it's super confusing to see me in the mirror. This one is the valve state 8100, which I used to prepare this video, so I was using kind of a real thing. And again, the EM1 got super close. So this amp is a valve amp, and it's the only Marshall that I own right now. I did own a couple of more Marshalls, but I don't really use them, so I sold them. I do use some, and if I need some, I borrow them from a friend, but usually the amp one, the Mercury, helps me out when I want to go with a JCM 800 tone, because it's so good at it. Anyway, the valve state is kind of was a kind of unpopular band, because I think it didn't really promise what Marshall was trying to achieve with it, going valve and then offering an amp which can also get the iconic tones on low volume, stuff like that. Valve does have some advantages, but it also does have some disadvantages. Anyway, so it wasn't really a classic Marshall at the time. It wasn't really what customers expected, but metal people came, took this amp, and did great things with it, because it does have quite a great rhythm guitar tone. I mean, don't like using it for leads, to be honest. Maybe with a couple of pedals you can breathe some life into the lead sound of that amp, but I like using it for rhythm guitars. So it's not a rare thing that I use it to double up, to blend rhythm guitar tones, to reamp it. But I guess I won't do that anymore, because I felt that the amp one sounded just as great doing what the valve state is doing. So Death was the topic. Death and Chuck Schuldiner. What did they do, Death? They used the a Marshall 8100 paired with a Marshall 1960 cab 4x12 with, again, G12T75 speakers. I have a very similar IR on my signal chain, and I do have the amp one, which is not the Marshall valve state, but which is just as good at doing this very thing. So the settings that I used are modern channel, and then we got gain on 8, so a little bit back down, We got bass on 5, so let's do that. Slightly less bass. We got mids on 2. Again, it's quite low in mids, not as extreme as Dimebag, but again quite low in mids. This is something which seems to work on valve amplifiers, right? And then we got highs on 7, so again quite high. All right, how does this sound? So again, if you know the real tone from Chuck, from the album, right, you'll certainly recognize that this is, again, very, very close to the original thing. Again, this is the sound went right out of the box. It may not be the most pleasing sound, but the advantage of this sound is that it's very, very defined. So you can play very fast, very low notes, even on 7-string. It'll still sound tight, right? So that's something that works pretty well. So let me play a little faster riff, right, to show how that works. So it does work very, very well. Got much definition in there. Still a lot of gain, but backed up a little bit, so feels slightly tighter. Certainly a great rhythm sound, which I wouldn't use exactly on modern productions as the main sound, but you can blend it and then achieve great things by it. So if you redo something like the Mezzo sounds or the 5150 sounds, which I'll show you in another episode where we talk about the modern area, right? This is something you can blend it with, and it will add much definition to your sound, trust me. Secret sauce in many cases. All right, what else do we have to cover here? So we did Slayer, we did Dimebag and Pantera, we did Metallica, we did Dream Theater, we did Death. 2 more tones I want to show you before I leave you tonight. So first of all, let's do the Children of Bodom tone. So Children of Bodom, they released an album in 1999, and the track I chose for the intro was Bed of Razors, because I think I just love the intro. So again, I switched the IR again. So it will sound quite different. What they used on the album, I wasn't exactly sure. There's not so much information available on that, but it seems that they have used a JCM 900, and may have blended it with something like a 5150 type-ish thing. They used a Marshall 9060 cab with, again, G12 T75, which are great metal speakers. These ones and the V30s, metal wouldn't be the same without those. So that is what I did in terms of my inspiration for the sound, and the actual sound I came up with was, and here is the surprise, on the Vintage channel. Oh my god, how could you use the Vintage channel for Children of Bodom? Well, you'll hear in a second. Gain is on 8, so it's pretty much where it was before. We got bass on 7, right? So the Vintage channel naturally doesn't come with too much bass. So we compensate for that by pushing the bass quite high. We got that, and we got mids on 4. So this is, not a whole lot of mids, but it's way more than for the other tones, right? Remember Dream Theater, Metallica, we had it on 3. And then we go for 5 on the high, so a decent amount of highs, but not too much. There we go. So this is a very interesting sound. It doesn't have a lot of bass, right? So naturally, I would add more bass. It wasn't my job this time, right, to go for a sound which I really much like in this situation. It was my job to do what they did on the album. So they have a great bass player at Children of Bodom, and they tend to turn the bass quite high up. They use guitars with EMG pickups, which are very tight. They don't have too much bass in there usually, compared to other active pickups like for Seymour Duncan Blackouts. They were called. Fishmans weren't around the time, but I think that was kind of the competitor. Back then, they do have more bass. And the JCM 900, I think, is also not too bass heavy. The 5150 is, though, but, wasn't sure if that was really used on the album. Again, as we're not having too much bass on here, we'll have definition, which is a great trade-off. Usually people, if they hear a sound like that, they'd be like, oh, no, it doesn't sound too fat. But the truth is that in our bedroom, guitar players, including me, we turn up bass and things like that because we want to sound fat in that situation. We want to have this thick, fat wall of sound. You don't want to do that if you're, properly recording an album and mixing an album, because it tends to destroy the rest of the mix. Anyway, so that's the reason why it sounds the way it sounds. It is quite a good tone. It's not as pleasing as other tones if you're playing, without the rest of the band, but it works very, very well when you're in a band situation. Let me play a couple of notes again on that sound. Stop playing vintage style licks when I'm on the Vintage channel. You can see what I mean, right? It is a very defined tone on the vintage channel of the amp 1 Iridium, right? So I really think that this is, a tone which just felt it felt very tight. It feels very tight. But again, not as pleasing when you're playing. It still sounds great. It's hard to play, I must admit. Many of these tones are very hard to play, right? If you know what I mean. I'm a kind of person, I'm very depending on the tone. It's not that I need tons of gain to function, but I need a tone that, in the situation, I find very pleasant to play with. This one is a hard one to play, just as some of the others. But, it does sound very, very tight, which is great. And the music of Chin of Bodom, there's so much going on, right? You got the drummer who's an animal. You got the bass player who's an animal as well. You got two guitars players. One of them oh man, this is super embarrassing. I forgot the name of one of my favorite guitar players, Alexi Leo. Well, sorry, was gone for a second. And then you got all the synthesizer stuff as well, right? So it just makes sense to pick a guitar sound which is not super bass heavy. All right, before we get to the last tone, which is a great one as well, let me quickly have a look at the chat to see the comments that you guys made. So the boost is always on. Yeah, so that was a question from Stefan. Stefan, thanks for that. It's a great question. You may have noticed that in the beginning as well, and right now as I'm playing, the boost is on. So what I did is I was taking over from mid-80s with Slayer, and Thomas did all the vintage tones before, because Thomas is the boss of vintage tones. So I was happy to leave that to him. What I did was recreating the more modern tones, and even if Slayer and bands like that are not exactly modern, right? They kind of were very important, very big inspiration for the modern metal bands. And this is not only because of their playing and their composing, but also the way they sound. And something that you may have heard, before is, metal players, they tend to use a tube screamer in front of everything they do. Well, not everyone is doing that, but I think we can agree on the tube screamer being one of the most important pedals for metal, right? So especially the TS-808 or the Maxon, is it Maxon 808 as well? I don't know, but these kind of green boxes, you can see them in a lot of signal chains from metal bands, and I tried to recreate that with the boost here as well. So that's why the boost was always on for most of the tones, for all the tones I did, because it felt like it was just right to do so. All right, that was that comment. So let's see, guys. We're having a discussion about Guitar Hero. I don't want to be part of this discussion right now. So yeah. It seems that you guys are talking about Guitar Hero a lot. Where just let's have a good time. Feel free to talk about everything you want in the chat. That's what it's there for. But maybe I'll give you an inspiration for another topic that you can discuss about, which is Symphony X. Symphony X, easily one of my favorite bands. Michael Romeo, easily one of my favorite guitar players ever. Right, also quite much in the top 10 of my favorite guitar players ever. Let's see. So for that tone, I did some research as well, and I found that Michael Romeo, and I was very surprised, was using a dual rectifier with a Marshall 4x12 V30 equipped cabinet, which I do doubt, but may have been different at the time. So I think he did use some kind of Mesa amp, because I think I remember to have seen an interview just years ago. I didn't find it. But an interview where he said that he was using Mesa preamps and Mesa amps and all of that stuff. This sound, I mean, if you hear the album, you can certainly imagine a Mesa Boogie amp being played there, so no problem with that. However, he started using Engel amps later. So I'm 28. I wasn't around I was around in the 90s, but I was just a couple of years old, so I didn't understand about the things that I do right now. So it's hard for me, being as old as I am, to imagine that he would play something else in Engel, because I've always seen him with Engel. But it does sound quite like a Mesa Boogie kind of thing there, and again quite like the dual rectifier. I think even the tone does have something in common with Rammstein sometimes. He's just having super great tight heavy tones. Anyway, let's get rumbling with this tone. So, where do I have it? Symphony X. What did I do there? I did put down the gain to 7, bass we have on 7 as well, but not the mids. Those are on 3, which makes sense. And then again, healthy amount of treble being on 5. This is the amp setting. We are in classic mode, so we need to switch back, which just makes sense because Mesa Boogie is very, very much recreatable in many cases with the the classic mode on this amplifier. And then we'll have the V30 equipped Mesa cabinet IR as well. And this is how we sound. How was the riff? That was a riff. So again, if it was me, I'd pull down the highs a little bit. They are sorry, that was reverb. So just would feel better. Yeah, this is a little better. So highest somewhere at 4.5. I'd do it if I was very precise. So again. Oh man, that was bad. Sorry. Right, so something like that again. Freezing here. Anyway, I think the tone is quite similar to what he does on the album. It is very tight. It does have some bass, but it's not too flubby wobbly around that area. And at the same time, it does have some bite, while it's still not too bitey, not too harsh, still kind of smooth. So it's a great combination of many different flavors that we know from metal tones. And again, it sound, you could easily play Rammstein with this as well. We'll do Rammstein in the next episode, trust me. So we'll get there, right? But anyway, again, this amp is getting quite close onto the sound. As I said, it has all these different flavors in there, and this is a sound which just makes just fun to play. If I was better prepared to play that riff, and if I had 10 degrees more in that room, that would have been more amazing. But let's play a little bit of lead with that tone. So I'll put on some reverb, and I'll just add back slightly more mids, and we'll see how that's. How just percussive this sound is. Muted legato is one of my favorite techniques, and Michael Romeo, the guitar player that I'm trying to sound like right now, was certainly one of the biggest inspiration I have on that technique. He does it a lot, but how percussive is that? I'll just leave the pick for a moment. It is so much fun to play. Sorry, I can't stop doing it. It is so much fun to play, muted legato with this sound. It's so percussive, so it's just so much fun. Anyway, so guys, I think we're going towards the end here, but I'll give you one last chance, to get your question in the chat. I'm happy to answer anything, or almost anything, but I'm still around for a couple of minutes. So if there is something which you want to talk about, which you want me to talk about, which you want to discuss with me, right? Just drop it in the chat, and let's have a great time. So for the last couple of minutes, I'm gonna switch back to the Dream Theater sound, because that is my favorite sound. That's where I really feel home and comfortable with. So we go back. Well, we are on the classic channel anyway, right? But we'll switch back to another cabinet. The one that I had for the Dream Theater tone is here, and then we'll slightly adjust the settings. So we had gain on max, we had bass on 6, we had mids on around 3, and then treble somewhere at 4, which just makes sense. So again, back in Dream Theater. Can add more volume because it is with less mids, and that is really what makes things loud, the mids. I'm playing that all night long. This is such a great tone. All of these tones, was just so much fun to work with them, to recreate them. And please keep in mind, you always have to see how they're used, where they're used, right? And never ever try make the mistake that if you don't like the guitar how it sounds right now, that it would also sound bad in the mix, because usually this is where different things happen: frequency masking, compression, all of that kind of stuff, right? But this is a tone which works just great in the mix, and which also is so much fun and so pleasing to play, without anything else going on. Say for rhythm guitar, we could even drop the mids. I'm leaving Dream Theater territory right now. I'm just doing some comfy tones. All right, guys, it is so much fun to play, and I think that is what I'm gonna do right now off camera, because I got so inspired again by this small amplifier. I mean, give it up for Thomas and all the great things he's doing with that. Again, it's such a small box, right? So it is has the height of a bottle of Coke, and it does amazing things. It is unbelievable, and this was a great task to recreate all these tones. With this, I got to know this amp so good, and I'm very well prepared for all the next episodes to come, because I know this thing by heart right now. I know what it's capable of. So yeah, thanks guys. It was a great pleasure to be with you. Just take care, have a great time. Never ever stop playing guitar. don't fight. It's all good. It doesn't matter if you're doing vintage metal, modern metal, if you play 7-8 string pop or whatever. You can even talk to other people who play other amps than Amp 1. I mean, they'll soon be playing Amp 1 as well because it's a great amp, but they will learn about the truth. No, just joking. So, just have a great time. Music is about, enjoying ourselves, about having fun. And I don't like these battles of genres and styles and whatnot, right? It's all part of the game. I love blues, I love metal, I love pop music even. It's just so much fun to make music with this machine. And this is what it's all about. It should inspire you to play music. This is why we buy it, why we have it. And it certainly does its job very well. So, thanks for tuning in. I hope to see you next month. And just make sure if you have any questions, write us on Instagram, on Facebook, an email. We're there. We're here for you to support you with your Amp 1. And other than that, I guess I'll see you next month. I'll leave you now with a very short clip of me demoing the Amp 1 Iridium, which I did years back when Thomas sent one over. So let's see if you like it. And yeah, see you soon. Take care. Bye.